Welcome to the June the 13th, 1989 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. This is our history tape number 96. And we're just so delighted today to welcome you to our show and to bring back someone that has been very, very important to the history of Grand Prairie, Texas. And we want to welcome to the set today Mr. Lloyd E. Bowes. Mr. Bowes, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're just so excited to have a young man of your stature here. Now, Mr. Bowes, you know where your camera is located, and you know the gist of the things that we want to find out from you. So would you look into your camera and give us your genealogy, beginning with your mother and your father? Would you do that for us?
Yes, I'd be pleased to. My mother name was Scott. She was a native of Texas and of Hunt County. Her father's name was Sidney Smith Samuel Sidney Smith Scott. And he is also buried in Hunt County. She married my father, who's from Missouri and living in Texas at the time. His name is William Franklin Bowes. And he had only one brother and 3 sisters. So that's about as far back as we've been able to trace his background.
All right, would you give us, you gave us your grandmother's maiden name, but you didn't give us her first 2 names. We need that for the record. Eliza Rebecca
Scott Bowes.
Eliza Rebecca Scott Bowes.
Correct.
Oh, that is good.
Correct.
All right, now, did they have any other children other than Lloyd E. Bowes?
Yes.
All right.
They had a very large family. They had Lloyd and Floyd.
Lloyd and Floyd.
My twin brother, who now resides in Houston.
All right.
And is retired from the University of Houston. And his family lives in Clear Lake, and his son and daughter in Houston. Then I have 4 living sisters, Mrs. Mattie Reed of Wichita Falls, Mrs. Silva Brown of Commerce, and Miss Bernice Bowes of Commerce, and my other brother, Scott Bowes of Oak Cliff. So we're all here fairly close. Then I have a younger sister, Mrs. Billy Cargyle, who lives in South Carolina. And then I have 3 deceased, 2 sisters and a brother who are deceased. And I have another sister that's deceased also, Vera, who was between Mattie and Silva. And the other children were older, and I did not know them.
I see. All right, now, we've gotten your genealogy and a little bit about your background of the Bowes and the Scotts, but tell us a little bit about your paternal grandparents. And you mentioned that 1 or 2 of them served in the Confederate Army and that one has a Confederate stone. Those that listen to our history show are very intrigued about such as this. Tell us a little about that, would you?
Well, Samuel Sidney Smith Scott has a marker, and as I mentioned, is buried in Hunt County in a small cemetery north of Commerce, Texas. And he was also a prisoner of war during the Civil War. My father's stepfather, Mr. Mitchell, was also a prisoner of war, and I do not know where he's.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, your stepfather, could you give us his first name, please, sir?
I'm sorry. I
That's
don't believe I know
right.
his first name. I did live to talk with him and knew him, and he told us of some of his experiences during the Civil War, which was very, very interesting. But my other grandfather, I did not. He was dead before I was born.
All right. Now, of the people that were in the Confederate Army, do you know where they migrated? The Scots migrated from another state before they came to Texas? Do you have any of that traced back?
I'm sorry, I don't know. Yes, we do have it traced, and I just didn't look it up. I'm sorry, I don't know where they came from, because most of the people now, the Scots, have been in Texas for a long, long time.
Oh, that's wonderful. You consider yourself a native Texan
Yes,
then, right?
yes.
All right, let's skip you for a few minutes and get Connie. Connie, your wonderful wife, give us her
Okay.
mother and father's name and her genealogy.
Okay, her mother was Ada McBee Irwin, and she lived in Hazen, Arkansas, and she met her husband there, whose name was William Claude Irwin, and they migrated to Texas. He was an engineer, and she was a housewife most of the time, but later became a professional sales lady and was very successful. But they had two children, my wife, Connie, and Catherine. But their father passed away when my wife was quite young, so she did not have the opportunity to talk to him much about her background. Her sister Catherine lives in California, and she and her husband came back to Texas, being native Texans, last year to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wonderful.
And we were real pleased.
All right, now, Connie, I believe, has a stepbrother. Would you like to bring him into
Yes.
our picture today?
Yes, I certainly would. Jerry Dismuke, who lives in Grand Prairie, Nottingham. He's a retired colonel from the Air Force and moved here after he retired about 15 years ago. So he and his wife live on Axminster in Grand Prairie, and they have 3 children. And they're all outstanding children, and we're so pleased to have them in Grand Prairie.
That's wonderful. All right, now, when Mr. Lloyd E. Bowes was born, probably down in the Hunt County area, tell us where you were born.
Yes, I was born in the county joining Hunt County, which is Fannin County.
All right.
That's Sam Rayburn's county.
Okay.
And our farm almost joined theirs. I was born out in the country, and then we moved to town, and I grew up in Commerce, Texas, where my wife was born. And so our childhood was in Commerce.
All right. And you went to what schools as a young boy? When you were on the farm, did you go to the school near the farm, or did you wait till you went to Commerce? And tell us about that, your
Okay.
early school days.
My early school days were all in Commerce. It's kind of ironic. I made my living in the public schools, but I never attended a public school until, well, ever, I suppose. I started the school in the kindergarten at the college. It's a demonstration school, and I continued there until I finished my degree at East Texas, at that time East Texas State Teachers College, with a degree in education, so entered the teaching profession. That was in 1939. Then, after teaching a couple of years and working at North American a year, I entered the Air Force. After entering the Air Force and continuing my service there until at the end of the war, I was fortunate to go to school at Texas A&M, where I received my master's degree, and all of my graduate work was done there. I was very fortunate in that I was also high school principal of A&M Consolidated High School, which is a very nice place to work, and I came directly from there to Grand Prairie
All right.
in 1951.
1951 is when...
52, I believe.
1952 to Grand Prairie.
Right.
All right, now, but let's take you back to Commerce and
All
this
right.
very unusual school that you attended. Where did you meet beautiful Connie?
In that school.
In that school. Y'all met in that school.
We went to school together in the grade school. Of course, we didn't start going together in grade school, but we did in high school. And we graduated in the same high school class.
class of
36.
1936.
And then we graduated from college in the same class of 1939.
Okay.
And as luck would have it, we were both hired. We were not married, but we were hired at the same school to teach north of Garland in the community of Nevada, which has a community high school, it's called now. It's Lavon and Nevada, and those schools, I believe another district went together. So we felt very fortunate that we were able to continue being very close together. And of course, we were not married until we had taught a year. In those days, you had to get the school board's permission even to get married, almost to have a date.
Oh, that is exciting, isn't it? So then you all married in what year?
1940.
1940, and you've been blessed with one beautiful daughter, and we'd like for you to give us her name and tell us a little bit about what she's doing before we trace you back through North American and the Air Force.
Okay. Well, of course, as you can see, from 1940 until now, we will celebrate our 50th next year. So we're very pleased about that, and feel very fortunate to have had each other so long. Now, our daughter is Elaine Bowes. She's a practicing attorney in Dallas, and she specializes in and is board certified in oil, gas, and minerals, and worked 10 years for Sun Oil company. Now is in private practice in the oil industry.
That's exciting.
She still is not married. I start to say she still has her horses. She's never been without a horse since she was 10 years old. She got her first horse and has continued to keep horses, and she enjoys that.
Oh, that is wonderful. All right, now, Mr. Bowes, you mentioned coming to Garland around the Nevada area, Lavon, and then you married. Where did you all marry? In that area, or were you in another place in Texas?
No, we married in Commerce, but we asked the minister from where we live there at Nevada to perform the ceremony. So Dr. Bowling came to Commerce, and we were married in our home church in Commerce. We both had attended for many years in Commerce, so that's where we were married. And my wife's mother still lived in Commerce at that time, and my mother still lived in Commerce, and my father. So that was where she would naturally select to be married.
All right, now, what brought you to North American aviation, the Air Force, and et cetera? Which came first, North American or the Air Force?
Well, North American came first. I'm really pleased that you asked that question, because I think it's very important. People were more patriotic, I feel, in those days. We were all so willing, ladies and men and boys and girls, to do what we could for the war effort. So I felt that it was my responsibility, not necessarily duty, but my responsibility to contribute whatever I could to the war effort, even before going into the Air Force. So I came to North American and was able to work there until such time that I was fortunate enough to get in the Air Force. I had signed up for the Navy, and I found out I was colorblind, so I couldn't go to the Navy. So I signed up for the Air Force, and then I was called in a short time.
All right, what did you do at North American Aviation?
Well, I started out in Section 8, which was a welding department. I had never done anything with my hands, so to speak, so I wanted to learn a trade. So they would teach you how to do that sort of thing. You could practice during your lunch hour or anything on doing the welding. So I learned to do that job. Then I transferred to another department, which was more or less moving items around. I don't remember the number of that department, but it was taking parts from one place to another.
Department 16.
16, I believe that's right.
You bet.
And so we were doing that quite a bit.
All right, after North American Aviation, you stayed there until you got into the Air Force. And upon entering the Air Force, where did you go, Lloyd?
Now, that's a question I wish you had not asked. I'm a very fortunate person. I didn't have to go very far. And as I mentioned to you, I have a twin brother, and I must tell you this story first. He, on his service record, it's indicated he served in 33 different countries, and he was in the Air Force, joined after I did. I joined, and I was sent to Mineral Wells for induction, and then back to the big city of Greenville, Majors Field, where I spent most of my career. But having been a teacher, I was put in a training command. I was eligible for overseas duty all the time, but never was called, because when the 8th Air Force took over Majors Field, I was transferred to a British field where we trained British cadets. So I had a long trip to make from Greenville all the way over to Terrell, Texas. So, and many people from Grand Prairie, I found out later, served at Terrell. They used civilian instructors. One of our former mayors was one of the instructors. Mr. Gene Gorey was there at that time. Hank Peake was there, and a lot of other people, which I did not know at the time, but I found later when I moved to Grand Prairie, they were there at the same time I was. The military unit was very small, and the civilian population was very large. We just had a very few American soldiers there because our job was to take care of the British soldiers that were sent in for training.
All right, now that we have you in the Air Force, and now that we're getting you out of the Air Force, when you were discharged, where did you go? Did you come back to Grand Prairie, or is that another story?
Well, I was discharged in San Antonio, and you might know it's still staying in Texas.
Yes.
I just can't get me out of Texas
That's
somehow. So then I went back into the teaching profession, and I went to West Texas in Childress County, right out of Childress, a small district that no longer exists, called Carey, C-A-R-E-Y, Texas. And I was fortunate enough to become superintendent of that small school, and then from there I went to Texas A&M, and I realized I would need more education if I stayed in the profession, which I had decided to do at that time.
All right, and after leaving Bryan, or Texas A&M schools, you came to Grand Prairie in 1952. What brought you to Grand Prairie, Texas? Was there a person or a reason?
Very definitely.
All right.
Mr. H.H. Chambers came to College Station and was interviewing, I suppose, people. At least he interviewed me for the job of junior high school principal, and I explained to him that I had never been a junior high school principal and that I really had no desire to become a junior high principal, since I was a high school principal, and that's where I had started, and that's where I felt that I should continue. So he said, well, he had just employed a high school principal, but that if I would come to Grand Prairie, that he would pay me the same salary that he was going to pay the high school principal. So I decided to come. He painted a very rosy picture of Grand Prairie, explaining to me that Chance Milton Vaught had just decided to come to Grand Prairie and that things were really growing, and General Motors at that time had already completed their building in Arlington, and things were really, really happening. So it seemed to be a challenge to me, so I decided to come to Grand Prairie.
And what was your first assignment of that junior high?
Well, it was Grand Prairie Junior High School, which is now Lee Junior High School, being the only junior high school in town. That's where I was assigned.
On Grand Prairie Road?
Grand Prairie Road, 500
And you stayed
blocks.
there how many years?
2 years.
2 years? And then what happened after those 2 years, Lloyd Burroughs?
Well, the high school principal left, and then I was sent to the high school.
That was the Grand Prairie High School?
At the Grand Prairie High School, that's right. That's the Gophers. So I stayed there only 4 years, though.
All right.
And then I moved to the school administration building.
All right, and in the 4 years you were at Grand Prairie High School, you saw a lot of things come down the pike, right?
Right.
A lot of good teachers.
Oh, yes. A lot of good teachers and a lot of good students, of which Many of them are still around here and are doing so well. We're so pleased.
Do you still hear from those
Oh,
students?
I surely do.
Stop you on the street in the supermarkets?
They do better than that. They take me fishing.
Oh, that is great.
Yes, I see quite a few of them. They're very kind and very considerate of Grand Prairie and of things that happen. But we were a very close group. See, some of the students that were in high school were also in junior high school when I was. Carlisle Smith and Weta were both in junior high. Then Carlisle went to Grand Prairie High School 1 year before I did, and Weta and I went the same year. And so it was quite interesting.
Long-lasting friendships,
That's
right?
true. That's true.
All right, now, we have you going from the high school to the school administration building. What was your assignment at the school administration now that you're up in the big time?
Well, my assignment was to assist the superintendent, Mr. Chambers. And Mr. Combs was also to assist. He in the business department and in purchasing and all that, and I was in the field of curriculum. And I enjoyed that quite a bit because I got to work with all the fine teachers in the district as well as the principals. And then it developed into, as we grew and we got more help and more people, then my final job was actually mostly just with principals.
You were an assistant superintendent then with the principals under your direction.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that the most favorite of all of your assignments in the administration building?
Well, yes, and as I said, when I retired, everyone has one group they're really partial to, and the principals were the ones that I was most partial. I really enjoyed them a great deal. They were so kind to me. They really carried me. In fact, we had a lot of good times together. And
what was the magic year of your retirement from the Grand Prairie ISD?
well, I generally have to look at the watch they gave me.
Oh, yes, let's just happen to show that.
Which is engraved in 1978.
1978, you retired from the Grand Prairie ISD.
That's right.
All right. Lloyd Bowes, what have you been doing since that time?
Very little.
Well, you've been
Yes,
in...
we did quite a bit of traveling. My wife, of course, as you know, was fortunate enough to go back and get certified to work with children that were handicapped. So she worked with the mentally retarded children for the last 10 years of our career. And she taught the trainables, which is quite a challenge. And so by nature of her being in the teaching profession also, it made it nice that we could retire about the same time. She did retire a year before I did. But we had never been anywhere, as you can see from asking me where I was during the war and all. So we decided to do some traveling. So we traveled quite extensively. The first 3 years we were retired, we went to Europe. And then we took other trips and just got back off of a 9-day trip to the southern states, which was quite interesting. So we still are very interested in traveling. And I suppose that has taken most of our time.
Now, we've heard about Mr. Lloyd Bowes' husband, Lloyd Bowes' parent, Lloyd Bowes' principal, administrator, North American Aviation, Air Force person. But now in the community, you have always been a mover and a shaker, Mr. Bowes. You'll have to tell us about some of the clubs, the church. What motivates Lloyd Bowes into the community to be so very focal?
Well, you're very kind. I did enjoy being in the things that I was in, and of course, I don't know. I think that I was rewarded from the things, what little I did, of course, and I'd hate to have to pick a favorite thing that I may participate in. I've always been a longtime member of the Grand Prairie Lions Club and the YMCA, and of course the Chick organization meant a great deal to me, and I still have very fond memories of that. And had I been alert enough when you asked me to do this, I was going to dig out a picture of you and me and the vice president at that time. But I have all these things, filed now that
Filed conveniently,
I used to hang them where I could see them. But I think that was a real good organization and still is. I enjoyed the editorial recently about that organization. But I think...
How about your church work?
Well, of course, I've been a very active member of our church and presently on the administrative board at the First Methodist Church.
All right.
I'm not as active as I would like to be, but I have maintained my membership and our family membership there. But we've had a lot of, Grand Prairie's been very good to us. We've really enjoyed Grand Prairie.
And you are known, too, as Mr. Democrat here in Grand Prairie, Texas. You're always into the political scene, and that's very important. Are there other avenues of interest that you have in the last couple of minutes that we have on this interview?
Well, I'd like to say one thing about politics, and I'd like to encourage more people to get involved. I don't really claim to be a politician. I'm an interested person that wants to learn about the candidates, and I would encourage other people to always select me a candidate. I like to do that. And I think I've always followed the rule that I've never bothered a candidate after he's elected. Now, when I say bothered, I don't mean I don't call on them or ask them when I have things, but my interest is purely to be sure that Grand Prairie has a proper leadership. And I think to do that, you must be involved. So that's the reason I've been involved in politics. Now, what was your other question?
My next question is, in the last minute that we have about a minute and a half.
Okay.
I'd like for you to look out into your camera and tell everyone why you like Grand Prairie, because you're making your retirement home here. Would you tell us about Grand Prairie? Do a sing-song for us.
Well, that's real easy. I do that every day just about to people I meet. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I think if you live in a place 35 years and involved in the things we've been involved in, that if you have any friends, they're here, and our friends are here. And as I say, it's been a very, very helpful place for us, and we just enjoy it a great deal.
I know that the Seroptimus Club of Grand Prairie, Texas will never forget Lloyd Bowes when he helped to paint the inside and the outside of our house, do wonderful things for the historical organization, our house next door. You've been a contributor all the time that you've been here, Mr. Bowes, and we want to thank you on behalf of the city for all of the good things, the many volunteer hours you've given, and especially for being on this show and documenting all of this good stuff for us.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it a great deal. I wish I could be of more help, but it's real easy for me to talk about Grand Prairie.
Thank you very much for being with
sir.
us. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.